Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's number one do it yourself advocate show, Timeshare Solution or Surrender. This is our 51st episode, folks, and it has just been the most amazing journey with Irene Parker, who is genuinely the best person and has the best team in the world to help people who have become victims of the deceptive acts of timeshares. Now, just imagine yourself going on vacation and you get home, you've enjoyed yourself, and then you realize the worst thing in the world that ever could have happened. You bought a timeshare based on the promises that they told you in a conference room for 3 hours, holding you hostage, and you realize you are stuck with it for the rest of your life. Well, Irene's here to share with you. Sometimes you're not. And sometimes there are just ways to figure out how to use that. But anyway, 51 episodes. Irene, you are a trooper. You're my sea hero. Have you heard that term?
Well, it takes more than one person to accomplish this. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Jake Burku, who is actually on vacation right now in Hawaii, and also Sherida, who's been on our show a couple of times. And they know as much as I do about timeshare, that's for sure. Jake knows a lot more about legacy resorts than I do. Sheridan knows more about Marriott than I do, that's for sure. So today, what we're going to be talking about is first Jake said he wanted to talk about incidental benefits, and I was like, what do you mean, like using the swimming pool even if you're not reserved there? But what we're really talking about is one of our goals is, of course, to improve communication between the members and owners and the developers. The second is to promote a secondary market, a viable secondary market that the developers have gone out of their way to deliberately suppress. And so when you buy on the secondary market, you need to check and make sure that you're getting what benefits may be excluded because you bought from the secondary market. And this is especially important for Hilton Grand Vacations because Diamond sold non-deeded right to use points and Hilton sold deeds with accompanying level of points. And is it better to upgrade to HGV Max, or is it better to just buy a Hilton deed on resale and then you do have access? The second thing is inventory management. I followed about 12 Wyndham lawsuits, and a common theme was lack of availability. And I hear that over and over from other resorts. I don't agree that you can always book cheaper online, but if you can book cheaper online rather than using your points, is it worth buying a timeshare? And then the most common question, what happens if I stop paying my maintenance fees? So before we get started, Jake, let's start with you. Could you give us a little bit about your background?
Specifically, I started out as an engineer in programming in the 70s. So that's a long time ago. And then eventually gaining some knowledge of the different industries, I honed my expertise on management consulting. Regarding timeshares, I was involved in timeshares. This is a funny story. I don't know if you have some time, but just quickly,
Sure.
I was my wife's parents went to a presentation in New Jersey at the Playboy Club in the early
Wow.
70s and came back with here we bought a $3,000 contract for 10 years at this resort, which is right next to the Playboy Club, and you can go there every year. And we said, we're not really interested, but it kind of piqued our curiosity. And that resort went under in about 2 years. The Playboy Club was sold and canceled. So the Playboy Club disappeared, and the resort itself was a very old resort that buildings that needed a ton of renovations. So RCI dropped them, and then they dropped them from RCI because of the quality of the accommodations, and then they were gone and done. So that was my initial exposure to timeshares. And eventually we found the value in timeshares in the 80s and 90s. And then when I had more time, I got involved with a resort in South Lake Tahoe, and I became the treasurer for the resort. That led to getting some national exposure in the article that was published in 2016, I would say 16 or 17, by the New York Times regarding the hard sell coming back. And they decided to put my picture in the New York Times in the business section. It gave me some national notoriety about fighting the big clubs that were trying to take over the resort that I was on the board of. And since then, I've been involved in issues of owners trying to resolve their disputes with associations and trying to keep current on all the different movements in the timeshare industry.
Thank you for that. And Sherida, I know I sort of am responsible for getting you into what you're doing today. So can you tell us a little bit about Marriott? Because I always had them right up there close to Disney in terms of honesty, but we've been now getting more Marriott complaints. But I still think they have it's one of the best timeshares to buy on the secondary market. If you could just talk about a little bit what you do, and if you're going to buy on the secondary market, is it better to buy deeded points or a deeded week?
Well, I just got off the phone with a customer. I had to take that call. But can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Buying on the secondary market, we still sell strictly legacy weeks and pointed deeds. And back in 2010, up until 2010, Marriott was selling only legacy weeks. And then they had a program where you had to pay thousands of dollars to transfer it over to a deeded points. But nowadays, you don't have to do that. Once you buy a week, it automatically gives you the chance to use the points. And this is on the primary market. When you buy in the secondary market, we're not sure which way that goes because Marriott's always changing the rules. It's a little murky. So nobody ever asks us that question if they can use their legacy week for points. When people buy a legacy week, they are purposefully buying a certain legacy week they want to use each year. So it doesn't seem to be an issue for them. And people who want to buy points naturally don't want to have a deeded legacy week. So,
but you can still deposit your legacy week with RCI and exchange it wherever you want to go?
I think so, but I wouldn't say for sure positively. That would be something they would have to look into the contract or call customer service and ask them. We can't really say one way or another because we're not sure what Marriott's going to tell them.
Okay, and one of the biggest complaints we have, I just finished a 27-page report of 17 active duty service members, and it's just alarming how many were told that they could rent to either offset the cost of the program or even make a lot of money. So you also work in rentals. Do you work with the legacy week rentals and renting out points? Like if I have Marriott points, do I give you 5,000 and then you go book something and try to rent it out? How does that work?
I have done that. If I have access to their dashboard, I can do that, but we prefer to counsel them on what to book themselves. So they would book a legacy week, a week somewhere at a specific resort, and then I would book that or list that for rent.
Well, and one reason why I consider Marriott to be a more ethical company is all of these people maybe had 600,000 Wyndham points. And if you buy 400,000 more, you'll be million. You can rent it out and offset your costs. One person tried to do that, and the two approved Wyndham programs didn't work. The other person was given a name of a rental company, and it did work, and he received a cease and desist order accusing him of a commercial activity. And and Blue Green is the worst of the worst, where just droves of people saying they told me to buy points to rent, and they are just Gestapo's suspending accounts left and right, some without warning. Some of the people I talked to, in no way was it commercial activity. At least Marriott defines it, where I believe, correct me if I'm not accurate, but if I'm a Marriott owner, I can transfer 20,000 of my points to anyone I want, or I can receive 20,000 points from anyone I want to sort of limit it.
Right. We haven't come across any of that sort of activity at our business, though. But yeah, that's the rule.
Okay, so and then, but I guess there's those that could still try to attempt to do it commercially by maybe getting a bunch of people to get 20,000 points together. I don't know. There's probably always a way to run around this. Now, Jake, at your resort, did you have a rental program for if I couldn't use my week? Would you just expect them to rent it on Red Week or Tug? Or would your resort actually help them to rent?
Right. So we had both options. So first of all, the simple one is the one where you use the resort management had the program, and the board approved the contract with the management company to accept deposits for rental from owners. So an owner would make a reservation, they'd give it to the management company to rent. The management company would try their best to rent that unit, and there was a percentage that the owner received back. What happens in these programs typically is if the unit is somewhat desirable, they'll rent out a 2-night weekend, and then they would get nothing for the rest of the 5 nights. The unit would stay empty. So the owner would get 2 nights or 3 nights or 4 nights, or it would rent out for some type of a discount, where the bottom line is they recovered a portion of what the maintenance was for that year. So with the management company, there is no assurance that you're going to recover all your money, but most of the time you would recover some of what you paid for maintenance. And then the owners is part of the governing documents, is the owners can rent out the unit. But because we've had problems, especially with large clubs that owned inventory at our resort, we wanted to make sure we weren't competing in the same channels. So we put something in our governing documents that said that you should check with the association before you use a specific channel. So, for example, Airbnb, if the association didn't use Airbnb and you decided to put your unit on Airbnb, it was just fine. But if the association already had an Airbnb account and was renting out weeks, then we didn't want the competition. The association didn't want the competition from individuals in the same channel. So that's the limitation that we put on it. But the one thing that we did is we created, outside of the timeshare plan, outside of the resort, just owner to owner, since our resort has over 7,000 owners. At the owner level, we created a website and a spreadsheet, not a website, but a group and a spreadsheet. and the owners exchange information among themselves. So our owners now tend to vacation with their neighbors and friends and families and rent additional units from our owners. And then our owners also, if they feel like they can't use their week this year, they will put it out on this spreadsheet and they will have other owners rent it from them. So using this system outside of the confines of the association and management, our owners are able to recoup most of the cost or the complete cost of their annual dues by renting out the resort, not to the general public, but within the confines of our association.
But if they wanted to rent through the general public, like through Koala or something, they could do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And then the apps now, as long as we're talking about renting, one of the biggest complaints is lack of availability. And that one of the, if you're going to buy a timeshare and you can do some due diligence, I think Sherida would agree, and Sheila, our board president, that the last timeshare you ever want to buy is a timeshare that will not let you out under any circumstances except maybe medical hardship, and even that is a problem. So Sherida unfortunately purchased from Vacation Village, and now she's in the industry herself, but she was unaware of the problems with renting. And what I have always said, that it's in the best interest of the resort to find someone to pick up that dead inventory so that they're paying the maintenance fees. But when I read that Vacatia, which Sherida taught me how to say, bought Vacation Village and Great Eastern and DM Management, the whole big picture called the Berkeley Group. Vacatia, I've always assumed to be more of a rental platform. So basically, you can have these poor people that one person called, they're in California, they're in the military, no way can they make it to Florida. Too bad, you have to keep paying this the rest of your life. Well, now those people can get hounded, demands for maintenance fees every year, while Vacation Village happily rents out the dead inventory. Do I have that right? And if you want to tell us a little bit about your mess with that.
Well, back in 2019, my husband and I went to Virginia, and we were suckered into going into a presentation, and our sales agent found out that we also had a Westgate, and we didn't want to buy this Vacation Village because it was just too expensive. And they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I've got a friend. Don't tell anybody. I have a friend who can sell your Westgate to pay for your Vacation Village." She gave me his name, his number, what company he worked for. Don't tell anybody though. I do this all the time. I've got 2 units that I rent out to help pay for my maintenance fees, blah, blah, blah. So we trusted her. We listed our Westgate and our bonus week with Vacation Village, and of course nothing came of it. So I didn't really realize that this was a real bad idea until about a year later, which time after meeting you, Irene, I started writing the CEOs at Vacation Village every other week, reminding them of what they had done to us. And now I write to Vacatia besides every other week, and been writing to lawmakers and to the governor in Virginia and to all the other BBB and attorney general and so on. So far, nothing's happening other than at the very beginning they said, "Oh well, we'll waive the $250 processing fee and we'll let you out." And I said that would be
A theft of 44,000 or whatever you paid.
Yeah, right. So I'm fighting to get our money back. And I know it can be done. It's been done for one other guy I know. So just keep doing it. It's
Yes,
therapeutic.
okay. Exactly. So that takes us into the next segment we want to talk about, and that is the most common question is what happens when I don't pay my maintenance fees. And one of the producers of Pod TV is Nick Palavita, who's an attorney with the JD, and he always says JD means just depends. So Jake, people are worried, when you default, you get these demand letters that sound like they're going to take your firstborn child and your house you live in away. So if someone stopped paying their maintenance fees, first of all, I always advise that we had several people resolve this past week, and I had to convince a couple of them you do need to pay your maintenance fees because no resort will accept it back if your maintenance fees are not current. So we want to talk about how if I want to be released from my week where you were on the HOA board, it's better for me to contact you before I'm delinquent, but also what happens to the person that just didn't pay? How does your resort follow up with that?
Right. So the issue is when somebody can no longer afford, or somebody can no longer travel to the resort and enjoy what they bought in the first place. They don't know what to do. They more of a panic. Who do I call? So it's very important for the resort to be upfront and say this is the path forward. So then the path forward is the association established an exit program and had a program in place so that owners, when they couldn't travel anymore, they were up to date with their maintenance fees. They could just use the exit program to exit the resort, which involved paying at least 1 year's of dues upfront and paying for the transfer fee for the closing costs and transfer fee, which were fair at a rate that was just market rate for deed transfers. But the issue for the resort is that every resort has to have an ABC policy, and that is by law. Every resort has to have a ABC assessments, billing, and collections policy. And this assessments, billing, and collection that normally is renewed every year so that the owners know what it is included with the dues. And it says, if you don't pay these dues, here's how much we're going to charge you in addition, and we're going to suspend your account, and then we're going to get lawyers to chase you, and then we're going to cut your feet. And so that that is the ABC policy, but it has to be in place because legally you cannot foreclose, you cannot do anything to a deeded resort. And I'm talking about deeded resorts now, not points, but at resorts where you have a deed. The association can't do anything unless they have an ABC policy. The government wants every resort to have an ABC policy so that to ensure that everybody gets treated evenly. There's no special exceptions for anybody. So once you go delinquent on your dues, then the ABC policy kicks in. And the ABC policy at some resorts is a soft collection, meaning that it's not really a collection company, but somebody that calls you, and I'm talking about best practices. And somebody calls you and says, what's the problem? Why haven't you paid? Can you make quarterly payments or monthly payments? Can you come up to speed? Do you want to own it every other year versus every year if you have financial problems? So give you options and try to work with you. And then after that, if there's no response and no interest, then it goes to Hard Collections, which is a collection company that calls you officially. They're licensed, nationally licensed or state licensed as a collection company and follows the state laws on what they can and cannot do. And one thing they can do is affect your credit. So
By how much?
It's really up to the credit company. How much credit do you have open? There's many factors that go into how much does it affect, and then I'll defer to the experts on how you can prevent that from affecting, mitigate the problem with affecting your credit. But in general, what happens when it goes to hard collection, from hard collection, there's no place to go from there unless it goes into foreclosure. And a lot of times companies are reluctant to foreclose, or associations are reluctant to foreclose on inventory because the cost of foreclosure is more expensive than the cost of the unit on the open market. In other words, they can't sell it. Especially in today's environment, you can't sell this unit for as much as the association will pay to foreclose on it. So as long as it stays into collections, the association can no longer, and it's in the contract with the collection company. Collection companies don't want to chase somebody for 6 months and then give the unit back to the association, and then you just call the association and say, you know what, I'll just pay everything and get back. And then the collection company spends 6 months with letters and all the legal stuff that they do, and then end up with nothing. So once it goes to a hard collection company, it stays in that hard collection company forever. And it's very hard for associations to get them back, to say, this one account, if you can give it back to us, we think, we made a mistake. And then the association takes it back from the collection company, and then they can negotiate with the owner some type of a fair exit. But typically, 99.9% of the times, it just stays in collections. So that's really the life of it, and that's why I always recommend that the discussion happen with the association, the board, the association, the management company. The discussion should happen while you're fully paid. So time is of the essence. Go ahead.
So I like your idea of confirming the ABC policy. I never even considered that. And there is. I mean, it's something that I've learned years ago, that there are policies they have to abide by. One of the things is a cease and desist letter. If you send them a cease and desist letter to stop communicating with you and bothering you, by law, they're supposed to stop. Have you read up on any of that, and do you recommend that?
So that from an owner standpoint, it doesn't change anything. It does change. It does. You do stop getting the phone calls. So if the phone calls are the annoyance, then yes, you can stop the phone calls using a cease and desist. However, that unit still remains in the legal possession of the collection company, and it's up to them. I mean, if you want to get rid of it at some point, and I think the collection companies know very well that if you're trying to buy a house, the mortgage company is probably going to make you pay up. That's the
the way I explain it is, if I live in a condo and I default on a $200,000 loan, $300,000 loan, my credit score can go down 200 points. I've talked to over 3,000 timeshare members since 2016. The worst I heard was a 38-point drop for not paying maintenance fees. One person just a couple weeks ago said it went down 20 points. Some people say not affected at all. If I don't pay my HOA fees, they will put a lien on my condo, so I can't get clear title to sell it. But the HOA, not a lot of timeshare HOAs, according to the attorney we had on the show, don't maintain relationships with credit reporting agencies, but if they turn it over to hard collections, they will report that. Now, also, is California non-judicial foreclosure?
California is judicial foreclosure.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yes.
so in non-judicial foreclosure, there is notice of deficiency, notice of default, notice of intent to lien, and notice of intent to sell. So the difference in judicial foreclosure is it has to go through the courts.
Yes.
Jay?
So,
Yeah.
so yes. So you have to file. The association would have to file a lien on the property first, and you'd get a notice that it was filed in the county, and then they would give that unit to to a lawyer or to a company that's an expert in foreclosures. And it's a 6 months process where there is a judge involved that basically signs off of it, but there is a judge that has to be involved in it. So it's not done on a unit by unit basis. It's typically done on 25 to 100 to 200, sometimes even 300 units at a time, because the more you do, the less it costs. You also have to publish in a newspaper, 3 publications in a newspaper that these particular properties are being foreclosed, and then eventually it goes to the steps of the county county courthouse, where this property is sold. Nobody shows up, typically for timeshares, and then the resort gets back this particular deed, and then it is probably one of the cleanest deeds that you can get is foreclosure. But I just wanted to mention one more thing, because we're talking about not paying. And kind of a side thing that's important is some people put their deeds in a trust, thinking right immediately when they're thinking about it, they're in their 70s or 80s, they're buying this thing and they want their kids to have it. So they put it in a trust, and then it makes it even harder when they pass away. It's in a trust, it's delinquent, lawyers get involved and try to pay it off. So there's other ways where the collection companies are just fine waiting for the result. One of the
And I was shocked when someone called me and thought that it was that they were maybe talking to a scam, because they talked to an attorney in Florida that was going to charge them $3,000 to probate a week timeshare. So I called attorney Mike Finn, and he said, that's a little low. I'm like, really? For a 1 week timeshare? You're gonna...
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's really the complication if you're dealing with aggressive companies that are out there to hurt people. Then they will actually just wait until something tragic happens, and then they will eventually get paid or get paid a portion. And most of the money goes to the collection company because they're the ones that held it. Now there's a 7-year limit, right, on collections. So if it's been 7 years, then the collection company is just going to give up on it. And
Well, and we've had people.
You can fight the collection agencies in many ways, though. I mean, some of the things that I've learned is if they did take you to court, which they probably won't, but if they did, you can appeal it, you can deny it, you can argue it. Many things that you can do that kind of messes with them just a little bit. Odds are they'll take it to arbitration, but you can always show up. If you're served any legal document, don't sit there and think it's going to go away because you didn't show up. Always show up, because if you don't, they automatically win. If you do, you never know what might happen. The judge might take pity on you. Odds are not, but you just never know until you show up to court. But do not ignore any legal documents. And I do have a question for you. When they how many, what's the odds of them putting a lien on the property when when you stop making a payment? What are the odds?
You mean on the
Very low.
timeshare property?
On the
Yeah.
timeshare part, very low.
Yeah.
Very low.
So, and if they did put a lien on it, what happens then?
Right. So the only reason for the association to spend the money to put a lien on the property is if they intend to foreclose. So if you own the 4-bedroom penthouse week, then they most likely will put a lien and try to foreclose within a year to a year and a half. These are the properties that you can't rent for $5,000. You cannot. So therefore, the association is better off just taking possession of that and turning it over. However,
Right.
if you own the run-of-the-mill 1-bedroom high season that everybody else owns, and there is 200 delinquencies of that particular unit, they're not going to put a lien because they're not going to foreclose. There's plenty of inventory of that kind. So that's kind of an idea of why an association would go after a lien and then a foreclosure is if what the owner is holding is something very valuable.
So say that they do get the property and resell it, which is pretty much what happened with me when they sold me something. They said, "Oh, this person has terminated their contract with us, and so we're going to sell it to you." That's at a discount price, which it wasn't. But when they do officially transfer that deed to someone else, is that person contacted and are they removed from the debt? And do they get any of the money back from that? Just
They're
like
removed from
if a house foreclosed?
Right. They're removed, exactly. They're removed from that debt when the foreclosure happens.
How many
So
do
they
you
know
think they don't officially do that to?
I've heard of people being pursued after they received the notice that it had been foreclosed. They're still pursued for the promissory note if it's a loan.
Yeah,
But
that is just
even
way
if
over
the
the top.
property was paid for, none of that money went to the
No,
foreclosure
no,
process?
no. So the foreclosure process adds in the dues, the late fees, the interest, the court costs, the lawyer costs, all the costs of the association are included in that foreclosure. So a unit that may have like $1,000 a year dues, and the value of that unit on the marketplace is zero, is resale market is zero, it forecloses for $12,000. So nobody goes to the courthouse steps to pick up a property for 12,000 that they can buy for $1 somewhere else. But that is I think there are specific costs that you can go after the owner afterwards. Most of the time, by the time you get to the foreclosure, you're not sure where that owner is, where he lives. And that's all, it's civil after that. It's civil litigation and it's very expensive. So the chances of following up with civil litigation after a foreclosure are very, very low. And I think the best thing is for somebody to get a really, really good lawyer after that because they can probably make money. It has nothing to do with the association taking back that unit and selling it. It's the previous owner is gone, is completely off the books. And if
Can
they
people
don't,
just file bankruptcy on the timeshare?
yes,
No. I've had this happen twice where they filed bankruptcy, and after 7 years, they received a bill for 7 years of maintenance fees. So it wiped out the loan, but they still own the timeshare.
so
So
that
bankruptcy doesn't get rid of HOA fees. Am I to understand that?
it
Yeah,
does.
no, it doesn't. No,
Um,
it doesn't. Yeah, we had
It does
attorney.
in regular real estate, but it
you
doesn't
have
in
to have
timeshare?
You have to have a good lawyer. You can't
We
just
had no. We had Mike Finn. They have 500 timeshare cases, and he said never file for bankruptcy if the timeshare is the only debt because it can
right.
become an abandoned asset, so
That's
they
correct.
don't sell it. So
That's
that's
correct.
happened, and there
That's
is a
correct.
very good attorney in California. That happened to someone in California. I put them in touch with Eric Ridley, who is a debt collection attorney. He's not a timeshare attorney, and he was able to do something to help them with that. But just a couple weeks ago, I had somebody, the same thing happened.
So
Um, so,
the problem is when you go into, so you should never declare bankruptcy just because of timeshare debt.
yeah,
That's just doesn't make any sense at all. But if the timeshare debt is secondary to other debts, then you
doesn't
can
hurt.
file for foreclosure. You can
Yeah.
have the discharged or sold. There's companies that will take the timeshare and auction it off and try to get rid of it or get rid of it, or the association will actually take it back. Contact the association and say, look, I'm in foreclosure for the next 5 years, until it gets discharged. It's going to be a long time. So do you want it back? And the associations will take it back because you cannot get contacted for payment while you're in foreclosure. So there's a complete loss of contact between the association and the owners. I think one thing you need to understand about associations is, and this idea of engagement, is once you lose engagement with the owner and the owner understands that they don't need this thing anymore and they don't want this thing anymore and they have the rest of their lives and they go on, it's very hard to bring these people back. And the association's interest is to have paid owners. So when somebody goes into bankruptcy, obviously they have financial difficulty. They're not going to see these people for the next 3 or 4 years. They're not even allowed to talk to them or talk to them about their debt. So once they come back, and you don't get a notice of discharge when they're discharged. So you have to constantly look at these people and say, okay, is it over yet? Is it over yet? So by the time you get there, these people moved on to other places. They don't live there anymore. They may be in a different state. So when you initiate legal proceedings against them, it's dead. The best thing an association can do from best practices standpoint is take that unit back. And the easiest way to take that unit back is for the owner to be aware that when they go into bankruptcy, you don't want this thing anymore. You don't want the debt anymore. Don't wait to get out of bankruptcy and then negotiate with the association. Just give it back.
If
It's
they
that
will take it.
they will take it because you're in bankruptcy. They can't touch you and they don't know for how long.
Oh, well, now Cindy was on our show. You've talked to Cindy, Jake. We have really appreciated you, if there's a situation like this. Julie was just devastated, and you worked with her to rent on Red Week and Tug, and come November, she's perfectly willing to default after that. We had Cindy on the phone you talked to as well. She has 3 timeshares, and she has been able to resolve. Capital Resorts is going to take her timeshare back. So she attended a trade block meeting. The Minnesota Attorney General recently settled with Trade Block Encore Law, that's not a law firm, and Last Resort Consulting. And she attended the trade block meeting, and they said, we can get you out of all 3 of your timeshares by filing a quit claim deed.
Right.
How
So
would you
that's
respond to that?
right. So quit claim deed is valid when the person that's receiving it is willing to take it. So I think I've had that conversation previously with the one guy that wrote a book about timeshares and said you never need to pay anything anymore, just quit claim. Well, you can quit claim anything and the county will accept it, but the resort doesn't have to accept the quit claim. So unless you have somebody on the other side the resort, meaning the resort, you as an owner can quit claim it back to the resort. If the resort is willing to accept a quit claim, then you're set. This is a settlement.
Well, and in Florida, they passed a law that you can't sell a timeshare that has no expectation of paying the maintenance fees, because you could find a homeless person
Right.
and say, would you like a
Yeah.
nice vacation this year?
That's right. So, yes, and it's very important for associations to vet the purchaser to make sure that, and the association can refuse a transfer if they find out that the person that's receiving that deed, either a quit claim or just a good deed transfer to a company or a person that doesn't intend, the association should be upfront and just stop that transfer right there. And there's ways for associations to find out when that happens, but just stop it right there rather than wait until it gets transferred and then you find out that it gets transferred to a company or a person that never intends to pay, and then you
Yeah.
have lawsuits, and it's not worth it. So
I mean, and how sad that I've had people say, hey, my grandmother is dying. Should I transfer my timeshare to her? And I'm like, what an awful product that someone would call and ask me that.
Right.
Now, since we have 2 board members on, we have a total of 10 board members, I took the opportunity to, since January 1, when we formed TARDA in 2019, we would hear from 3 to 5 families a week, maybe. So since January 1 until a few days ago, I'm going to put on here, this is the first 100 reports that that we received. There were 159 families that reached out. And I put Disney Vacation up here as the beacon of honesty. I've listed the number of BBB complaints. Now it's not weighted. So as I, said, the 1,000 Wyndham complaints is probably similar to 155 Exploria complaints, because Wyndham is such a huge company. But we had, of the 159, I'm very proud of the fact that 100 people responded to our explanation of self-advocacy. Now, when we talk about exits, ARDA has a responsible exit website. So I had people complain about the BBB, that it's not helpful. But if you're trying to exit your timeshare, you can look up the BBB and it will tell you how that somebody's probably asked the same question, filed the same complaint, and you can learn in advance how your resort is going to respond. Soleil Management, Tahiti Village, Vacation Village, Club Exploria, find a buyer, there really aren't any. So in this one, Westgate, shortly after I purchased, my wife was diagnosed with lupus. I was diagnosed with heart failure and diabetes. So we've not been able to use it. We've reached out to Westgate, and Westgate responded, he may not agree with this disagreement, but that does not negate the contractual obligations we agreed to at the time of the purchase. If you got sick and you owned a house, you could sell it. And so then they go on to say, should you bring your account current, we will consider you for exit. And I actually sent a couple that both diagnosed with cancer. And Jake, I think you had someone that they was told that, and so they went ahead and paid it, and then they applied and they were turned down.
That's correct. They said that they no longer take deeds back after they pay the full year.
Yeah, so you really, unless you have something in writing, that's not a good deal. So we have the winner of the most complaints is Hilton Grand Vacations, and 32 reports out of 100 were Hilton Grand Vacations. And there is 1,594 BBB complaints. The A+ rating compared to Vacation Village, which is an F, that rating primarily corresponds to how quickly and efficiently they respond to complaints. And so the other thing that really bothers me is we had Lori on the show last week, Kim, and she said that she called Judy Kozlowski, who is such an expert on Hilton deeds. So she wanted to sell her Hilton, and Judy told her that she could sell it for maybe 300 to 500 listed, and she would pay and she would charge $1,000 commission. And Sherida, I think you have a similar policy, or you split the difference if it's a junk timeshare to sell it. But if you go to Club Exploria and even Soleil Management, they recommend timeshares only. And so they will, it was Sheila that went to Club Exploria, same thing, it's not worth hardly anything, and they advised her to list it for $8,000 to $11,000. No problem, just pay us an $800 listing fee. So, I'm sure that Sell My Timeshare Now and Timeshare Only has people that understand the industry, but we've had so many people that have, and it's against the law in Florida for a licensed real estate agent to exaggerate a listing price, but they get around that. So, I think, Tug, now, I wanted to ask this question though, so before we leave today, let me go over one more thing I had though on my presentation here, is I have the most common complaints from each of these. So this was 3 people, all 3 of them were, all you have to do to resolve your dispute with Westgate is to go stand outside and hold out signs for about 3 or 4 days a year, every year. And Carl on the right there, he was on his way to hold up signs at the Queen of Versailles documentary stage play in Boston. And lo and behold, a couple of days before the opening, he was finally able to resolve his dispute. But we had with Capital Vacations, the 3 complaints, one of them ended up on Orlando on My Side Reporter, is people that have owned deeds for 30, 40 years, or 20, 30 years, and they show up, and we had Sandra on the show, Kim, that same thing with, she owned Worldmark for 30 years, shows up, checks in, and they say, oh, Travel and Leisure bought it. So we don't have any information on you. You need to fill out, we need to put this information on you in the computer. Walks out not knowing she had bought 11,000 worth of points, almost homeless, calling us from her car. You were able to resolve that by reaching out to Wyndham Media. Exploria, no responsible exit. That's one of the biggest problems there. Flagship lost a lawsuit. People were complaining that it was an investment. And the reason for so many Hilton is Diamond members, the most frequent complaint is they told me if I don't upgrade to HGV Max, I'm going to lose all my locations. That's not true. If I don't, just tweak it, instead of you got to give up your deed and buy points, it's you got to give up your points and buy into HGV Max. And then Vacation Village, the Grandview people, you can rent it out for the Super Bowl or Formula One, make $6,000 in a week. That's not going to happen. And so same thing with Vacation Village. And Westgate and Wyndham, I say the best thing is being told that you could rent to rent to offset your costs, and that doesn't work as well. So one more question I have is going back to rentals. Is we had Joe Takis on, Kim, about November 4th, I think we had him on, and they have recently launched their Volca, I'll have to learn how to pronounce that properly, website, where they are implementing tokenization of timeshare, which I've had a hard time wrapping my head around what that even is. So, Jake, can you explain, like I'm a 5-year-old, what tokenization is and how can that help to rent out timeshares?
So yeah, I'm not really an expert on that, but I'll try. So tokenization, it's a different way of keeping track of ownership and maybe even rentals. So instead of storing it in a database somewhere, there's a intermediary that converts that whatever product you have a week somewhere at the resort, whatever reservation or ownership, it converts that into some type of a point system so that we're dealing with the exact same product or tokens. And so tokens have value and it's convertible to real value. And then these tokens are stored in a storage system called blockchain. It's a way of storing information that is different than others and typically visible to everybody, so that there's a lot less questions on whether somebody really owns something or not. For example, if you don't own something but you rent it out to try to rent it out, something you don't own but just got a hold of a week at the resort, if it's tokenized, then that token system can identify who really owns that unit. So it's a safe way of redoing the world in a way where the county is probably not responsible anymore for who owns what, or the resort, it's really the token system that's responsible for who owns what, and also deliver title or deliver usage to anybody else. It's just probably a better, safer way to transact ownership or weeks in a system. And then it's also some type of a standardization of what something is worth. That's what tokenization is. So if you're giving somebody a spring week in Orlando, I mean, if you have a spring week in Orlando versus somebody that has a mud week in Colorado, a October-November week in Colorado, there's a way through a tokenization of saying this is really how much this is worth, and then putting a value on it.
Do you get all that?
Yeah, the mud week.
It's That's my way of explaining it to a 5-year-old, but actually there's really two parts to it, right? There's the technology, and there's two guys that are really experts on the technology, and then there's one guy that's an expert on timeshare, and these three people got together and created this supposedly amazing system, and hopefully it'll take off, it'll add value, but there's no, right now it's very early in the process.
Well, and Kim, I'm told that TARTA is responsible. We had Ron Roberts, the two people that designed the tokenization, reached out to me. I connected them with Ron Roberts of Sage Marketing that had been on our show, and he introduced them to Joe Takis, who's been on our show, and they're really appreciative that we helped to make that connection, and they're more than willing to be on the show in the future. So, wow, I can't believe this went by so fast. We're down to our last minute.
Right. And it's been, I mean, gosh, it's been so informative. I've learned so much. I mean, and there's just so much more out there to learn. But the number one rule I think everyone needs to start following before you go into any kind of timeshare sales or any kind of sales, take your recorder in with you and record the session, because guaranteed, no matter what you're told, it's not going to be what you sold.
Right.
And yeah, maybe or maybe not that it's legal in your state. You still have a copy of what was told to you. And that's very important today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us and sharing their stories, their information. I do want to add, we're at the 2:00 hour. So don't forget to watch us every week at 1:00 Eastern Standard Time. Everyone
Thank
stay
you.
wealthy and stay healthy and stay warm. It's going to be cold this week.
40 below it.
72.
Yeah, we're getting snow. So,
Thank you.